In 2024, one of the most improved teams in ACC football, arguably, Georgia Tech. I I know maybe you want to debate me, but I mean, who are you going to debate me with? You mean the Miami team they beat? And if you overlook Georgia Tech, that's on you. I mean, they went through that whole Paul Johnson, Jeff Collins thing, and Brent Key has them boys playing, and I've been paying attention. For us Clemson fans, we need to pay a lot of attention because not only is Georgia Tech our third game of the year, it's our first away game. Yeah, in Atlanta, you ought to see the ticket prices. But you know what? I wanted to bring on someone who knows the rambling wreck of Georgia Tech. And that's why I brought on Rec Talk. Man, thanks for coming on here and hanging out with me.
Yes, sir, man. Thank you so much for having me. If anyone's doubting Georgia Tech, I've gone to school on you. I don't even do this for my own channel. I got notes. I went to school on you, Bobby Boucher. So let's do it.
Oh, man. So we'll dive right in. They had a really good season this past year. And, I mean, if a few more things went a little differently, the season would have been just top notch. I was pulling for y'all against Georgia in that exciting game. But tell me, how do you feel? And I know this is kind of a softball, but, I mean, honestly, how do you feel after coming out of that whole weirdness with Paul Johnson and the transition with Jeff Collins? And now you got someone I really like to watch coach. I have a lot of respect for Brent Key. How does that feel being on this side of things?
It's interesting, man. So, I have a lot of fun with a lot of different fan bases, and I get called a variety of different things. But one thing I take exception with is being called soft, because you can't go through what we've been through and still root for this team and be a soft fan. Yeah, we went through the triple option with Paul Johnson. Paul Johnson won a lot of games at Georgia Tech, won ACC titles at Georgia Tech. But he was, and I fight my own fan base with this to this day, like literally yesterday. Georgia Tech already has an impediment to recruiting in their academics. Every major requires Calculus 1 or business calculus. And then he threw another impediment with the type of offense he ran. So Haynes King is never coming to Georgia Tech. Aaron Philo, Zach Pyron. Though you're never going to get – look at all the great quarterback talent that Clemson has been a recipient of. Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, two generational quarterbacks, one from Gainesville, Georgia, one straight west of here in Carrollton. So, man, it was fun with Paul. Paul's, one of the – if I had one coach to pick to just prepare my team for one game, just to get us ready to play, I picked Paul Johnson. But if I want to coach for the long term, like it just is not going to be it. So we get through that. As a fan, you get made fun of for running a high school offense. And then you get human excrement in the form of a guy named Jeff Collins. You win 9 games in 3 years. And if you're not familiar with this, I've built a whole brand on my channel hating this guy. I've got a lot of hate in my heart for people that do my team wrong. This man had players hitting each other with pool noodles at practice. During Halloween, he had a dress-up party. He had a home run derby during the pandemic instead of practicing. And the results showed that on the field. We got beat by Notre Dame 55-0, Georgia 45-0. They could have scored probably 180 points on us if they wanted to. And it was one of the worst times of my life as a fan. That was tough to go through. But then there was light at the end of the tunnel. He was so bad at his job, not only did he get himself fired, but he got his boss fired, the AD. Can you imagine being that bad at your job that they fire you and then they say, hey, bring in that moron that hired you. We're going to fire him.
Wow.
Him too.
What a move.
Yeah. So Stansbury got fired. We bring in which we'll talk about in a little bit. We bring in, I think, the right AD for us in J-Bat, and we bring in Brent Key. What does Brent Key do with the exact same team, the exact same players, the exact same staff? He goes on the road, 3 touchdown underdogs twice in conference, one with Pitt and one with UNC that can't beat us to save our lives. Overcomes a 3 touchdown underdog, gets road victories, and basically earns himself. He was not the number 1 pick It was probably Jamie Chadwell, and there was some chatter behind the scenes. But man, Key has injected life into this program that's been desperately needed. There hasn't been this kind of buzz around Atlanta, probably, and I don't know how far back you go in watching football, but since the Joe Hamilton days, George Godsey days, that's when the Georgia Tech Clemson rivalry was really a lot of fun. But I'm excited, man. And it's not just like for this season, like our program health as a whole. Like, when was the last time we stole a recruit from you, like Tay Harris?
Yeah.
It hadn't happened before now. So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling, but I'm excited about the future of Georgia Tech.
I don't blame you because you should be excited. You're talking about George Godsey. I have a particular disdain for George Godsey and TJ Watkins hooking up there in the back of the end zone, hillside, Death Valley, handing Tommy Bowden his first loss in that. I want to say it was in the year 2000 season, somewhere in there.
It would have been 2001.
I remember that. I remember George O'Leary and that white hair over there. Yeah, I'll never forget that. And of course, Joe Hamilton was just ridiculous.
And maybe a guy named Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, that guy was okay. He was okay. He was all right. When I look at Brent Key, I see a guy who, like I said a little earlier, whether you're pulling for his team or not, you just can't help but respect him. The passion that he shows, the control that he shows. Let's kind of dive into your team. So let's just let's just look at this thing kind of like you're educating us Clemson fans and anyone else who's maybe watching. And it's like, who is Georgia Tech? We know the whole, 8 or 9 overtimes with Georgia. We know that your team beat Miami. But let's talk about who you have coming back. Let's talk about who you've lost, because this is really important, because I'm telling you, Brent Key can coach, and he's doing something special. I like his persona. Let's just dive into that. Peel that onion back and let us know what Georgia Tech has for us.
All right, so what are we losing, first of all? So the biggest concern for Georgia Tech, and I've been talking about this on my channel, coming into the 2025 season, is the defensive line. So let me just read off. I got my notes. Let me just read off a few guys we're losing. We're losing 8, Sylvain Yonjuan, edge rusher. Romello Height gets taken in the portal by Texas Tech. They saved money by screwing Mike Leach out of his buyout. So I guess they had money to get this kid. They've never paid him to this day, to my knowledge. Kevin Harris, another edge rusher. Joshua Robinson, Horace Lockett, Zeke Biggers, Thomas Gore, Makia Scott. All guys that contributed for Georgia Tech last year that are not going to be on the roster this year. So they're losing a ton on the defensive line, and it's not clear as of yet where that production is going to come from. They're probably going to have to make a pretty big move in this next portal window after spring. Offensively, they lose Eric Singleton Jr. Eric Singleton Jr. was a freshman All-American. He's a track star. He's like a 10-2 100-meter guy. Small guy, but he's rated like a 96 overall in the portal. And just a killer to lose. I mean, you don't replace a receiver like that, especially kind of with where we've been recruiting at Georgia Tech. So he goes and gets a bag. I'm not blaming him, but I'm also not necessarily rooting for him. Go get your money. Leave me be. We lose Chase Lane, who came in with Haynes King out of Texas A&M. We lose him to graduation. And we lose 3 pieces off the offensive line. Corey Robinson II, we lose to the portal and kind of brutally to Arkansas. And I'm not crapping on Arkansas, but I feel like we can go hand-to-hand money-wise with Arkansas. We're not able to hold on to left tackle Corey Robinson. Jordan Williams, the other tackle, we lose to graduation, and Weston Franklin. So that's what we're losing. You want to go into what we're getting? I don't really want to take your over. So what are we returning? First and foremost, Haynes King.
Yeah, of course.
And I've heard a lot of things said about Haynes King. Maybe he's not the purest quarterback. He's not the guy that's going to go out there and win a game solely on his arm. But he's a ball player. He's a tough kid. He's a ball player, and he's a playmaker. The key for him this season is going to be you can't have him be running back 2 for you, though, or in certain games running back 1. He's not going to finish the season, but we do get him back in his senior year. And another guy you might not have heard much of in Aaron Philo, a guy that's probably going to get snaps too, quarterback that broke Trevor Lawrence's Georgia State all-time passing yardage record, and got an opportunity to step up in some big games last year and did well for us. I'm excited for him. We bring in a running back, Malachi Hosley, out of Penn. He's like an all-conference guy for them. Big question mark for Georgia Tech is who's going to be that running back too, behind Jamal Haynes. Running back production, rushing yards, probably the most important thing for this Georgia Tech offense. In games we lost, we did not rush for more than 112 yards last year. In games we won, we rushed for at least 120. So if we could get above 120 yards rushing, we tended to do very well. We ran for 271 against Miami. Wide receiver, we bring in Eric Rivers out of FIU. Big 4-star, 93 overall kid out of the portal. Another track star type kid. Maybe he's a guy that can replace Eric Singleton Jr. We have a young kid, Isaiah Canyon, big 6'4", another fast kid at wide receiver. And one that you might not want to talk about, and probably a kid I'm most excited about on the defensive side, Tay Harris.
Right. Everything
I've heard about Tay Harris is this kid is an absolute freak. 5'11", 200, 4.4 flat 40 kid. I would project him to start probably day one for Georgia Tech.
Wow. Let's go back to Haynes King for a second, and I appreciate you laying that out there because I know about Haynes King. I know about some of the other players. You were talking about Haynes, but you said something there. I was thinking about this earlier today as I was preparing for us to get together. Yeah, I hear people talking about Haynes King going, well, he's not your prototypical fill in the blank. And I'm sitting there watching him play against not only Georgia, but I think that Georgia game was like unbelievable. And Georgia, they're looking at one another going, we know he's going to run it, but we can't stop him.
Yep.
Like he's lowering his shoulders, sacrificing his body, and we can't stop it. We're actually filling up the box. We still can't stop him. And so for me, I have a lot of respect for him. And in the college game, I think sometimes we can get so caught up in, well, what would they be at the next level? Great for them for the next level, but right now I'm enjoying watching them play now. Haynes King is something else. I mean, you have to be happy with this guy and have some comfort knowing that field general's coming back and he had some dog in him,
Absolutely. And look, he's a guy that came in from Texas A&M that no one really wanted. He had a weird throwing motion. He was coming off of injury. He had broken his leg or something. He had shoulder issues. He's still got injury issues to this day, but no one saw Haynes King being what he is today. If you list 1 through 3 top quarterbacks in the ACC, most people are going to have why is your quarterback's name escaping me right now? What's his name?
Cade Klubnik.
Cade Klubnik. They're probably going to have Carson Beck, and then they're going to have Haynes King somewhere in that order, and then the guy from Pitt. So Georgia Tech really hadn't had this kind of quarterback production since Joe Hamilton, since George Gotsey, because we ran the triple option for so long. Just a good kid, tough kid, and he's just a kid that knows how to win, just a kid that knows how to win. So I'm excited to see him.
Yeah. Just the fight that he has. I mean, and in the college game, that's one of the few things that's left in the traditional college game that no longer exists.
Yeah.
But you will see it from time to time, and I think Haynes King really embodies that. Let's talk about you guys lost your defensive coordinator. Am I correct? Tyler Santucci.
Yeah, Tyler Santucci. We lost him to Baltimore to be a position coach. He's going to be a linebackers coach for Baltimore.
Yeah, in our offseason, Clemson let go of Wes Goodwin, and before we locked into Tom Allen, Santucci was definitely someone that his name was floating around at Clemson. I was actually excited about. If you don't mind, talk about your new DC, your thoughts, maybe some concerns that you have about him going into this season.
So first with Tyler Santucci, don't undersell what he did at Georgia Tech this year. I hate to see him go. Georgia Tech had the 129th ranked rush defense the year before he got there. Georgia Tech couldn't stop the run to save their lives. They were the worst Power 4 team rush defense. When he left, they were like 29th or 28th. So he made them 100 spots better. We had some problems in the back end of the secondary, but he did a phenomenal job at Georgia Tech. So we hate to see him go, especially to be a position coach. He has to be taking a pay cut. So I have to think that he wanted to get to the NFL. Or look, we're seeing this phenomenon in college football, or this trend where coaches are just it's too much time, it's too much effort, or not even effort, it's just burning coaches out. So that could be the case too. Now, Blake Gidding, we're getting from Texas. On3 put out like top 5. It has to be like non-head coach recruiters, like the top 5 coaches that are not head coaches recruiting-wise. Blake Gidding was number 2. And this is coming in right as Georgia Tech is recruiting really like they've never had before. Georgia Tech had never signed a 5-star. I don't think Calvin Johnson was rated a 5-star when we recruited him. But you're winning recruiting battles with Georgia. You're winning recruiting battles against Clemson, against Auburn. And he's a guy that could really come in and step up the recruiting on the defensive side, which is much needed. He's also an absolute top-notch elite defensive backs coach. The number 1 defense in the SEC last year was Texas. The number 1, I believe, pass defense in the country was Texas. They had an absolutely dominant defensive back core. So when you have guys for us coming in like Dalen Pinson, that USC threw a bag of money at that Tech was able to retain, Tay Harris coming in, people you have returning like Clayton Powell-Lee, who was a freshman All-American like honoree. You could really see Georgia Tech step up in the secondary this year. We really struggle. Turnover-wise, I don't think we got many picks last year. The drawback with him would be he's never called plays before. So he's never been a DC before, never called plays before. So that's a big question mark. But I think Georgia Tech, we're not in a position financially that we're just going to be able to go do what Clemson just did, right? Mm-hmm. We're not going to be able to go get the top guy on the market. I do think this could be the next best thing.
Wow. Let's talk about, and I want to talk about your schedule here in just a second. I know you play Colorado in the opener. That's going to be interesting considering, I believe, Deion's sons, they're gone unless he's brought in some more sons. But let's talk about the things as a realistic fan, maybe something you're like, dadgum, I don't want to even talk about that. What is your concerns about Tech like this year that you step back, you look at this schedule, your schedule is actually quite favorable in my opinion. As I said, we'll talk about that in just a second, but what are some of those points you go, hold on, if we don't turn the corner here, maybe this is something that's kind of looming out here that no one's really paying attention to, but it could and potentially will bite us in the butt. What would be those things?
Number 1, we've already mentioned. You've got to figure out production on the defensive line. I don't care how good the back end of your defense is. You can only cover a guy for so long. So you've got to be able to get pressure on the quarterback. Tech struggled with that last year. It played into Tech's benefit against a team like Miami that had Cam Ward that was just going to dance around the pocket ad infinitum, and you were eventually going to be able to get to him. But you got to figure out production on that defensive front. Can a guy like Christian Garrett that Tech flipped from Georgia out of Prince Avenue, that's a 4-star defensive lineman, can he come in and produce day one? Yes, but I don't think you can expect that. Again, I think you're going to have to make some moves in this second portal class and whatever, shake the couch, get the quarters out, however much money you got to throw it at some defensive linemen, or the season could go off the rails if you just can't get off the field on defense. Not throwing any shade, but as Clemson probably has found out, and I know we did last season. Number 2, how is Haynes King used? Talked about this before. You just can't have Haynes. Did you see Haynes King slide in that Georgia game ever at one time?
Never.
I didn't see Haynes King slide once all season. That's not going to work. Like, he's not going to be able to be your running back 1 or 2 and remain healthy and stay on the field. And Georgia Tech to, take a step up this season, maybe get to the 8-9, possibly 10 win column. Haynes King's going to have to remain healthy. So that would be my other concern, is that he gets taken out early and we just can't use him. The last thing is offensive line. We are losing some production, 3 guys off the offensive line, and we don't have a clear running back 2. Like we just said, when Georgia Tech doesn't get the rushing yards in, if they can't get to like 120 yards rushing, they don't win games. When they do, they win games. So a little bit concerned about who's going to come up on the offensive line. We do have some pieces. And then who's really going to step into that running back 2 slot and give Haynes King a little bit of breathing room and health throughout the season.
As I'm looking at your schedule for 2025, it's quite favorable. Your biggest games that you're going to play pretty much are going to be in Atlanta in some form. I know you're playing Georgia at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, according to everything that I'm seeing, unless I read a misprint or something.
No, we sold our own home game. I mean, we did that for money. That's
that's well, I mean, but it's right down the street basically. So, for anyone who wants to check out Georgia Tech's schedule, you can go check it out online. I'll just quickly read through this. They kick off on August the 30th. That is a Saturday against Colorado in Boulder. They play Gardner-Webb. They have Clemson coming to Atlanta. They have Temple coming to Atlanta. Then they go to Wake Forest. They're off on the 4th of October. They have Virginia Tech coming to Atlanta. They go to Duke. They have Syracuse coming to Atlanta. Syracuse, much improved. At NC State, I don't know what to think about NC State. That's a whole other video, but last year I thought they were going to be much better. The wheels came off. That was embarrassing. The only other team that did worse than them with the wheels coming off was Florida State. Saturday, November the 8th, they're off. They're at Boston College. They have Pitt coming to Bobby Dodd, and they have the Georgia Bulldogs in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So as an outsider looking in at Georgia Tech, for me, I'm staring at this schedule going nine wins definitely is there. If some things go right, you definitely could hit 10. Is that realistic, or am I overlooking something?
Well, that's the thing with Brent Key in year 3. So, you've had your Bowling Greens in the past. You've had these big mistakes. Now in year 3, you're going to see, can you win all these games you're supposed to win and then grab some? So, for instance, a game like on the road to Boston College is a game that Georgia Tech loves to lose. A game like on the road to NC State is where Tech has slipped up in the past. Tech will play up to whatever level of talent they're playing, like Georgia, like Miami, and then they'll play down. Like, before we went to Athens, we played NC State and won by a point, I think, off a missed field goal from NC State. So can you get the consistency coming in? I don't know if Georgia Tech's over-under win total has been put out. I want to say if it has, it's around 7.5. I think 10 wins is pretty gutsy to call, just with some of the question marks you have, particularly on the defensive line. But I think, I think Vegas has got 8 as you win in money, and I think 8 or 9 wins would be an improvement, especially at 9 wins, and it would have Tech going on the right track. Now, I want Tech to win every game. I'm not picking Tech to lose any games, but they're definitely a team on the rise, and that's the other thing. You're not going to sneak up on anybody anymore.
Right.
You're not going to be this massive underdog, most likely. You got to go out there and with people noticing you and put some people on the ground.
Sure, 100%. Okay, so I know that this is way too early. I mean, as of the filming of this video, this is the last day of February. Of course, this is pre-recorded, but it's way too early. I know you're going to produce your preseason preview and picks probably in August.
Yeah.
But just having some fun here. I'll do this as a Clemson fan, looking at Georgia Tech football, way too early prediction. For me, I look at Colorado, and transparently, I don't know who they have coming back for sure, but I know who they don't have coming back. And I think this game against Colorado could be really good. I love good inspirational sayings and getting all jacked up with, slogans we can slap on T-shirts, but when the ball is spotted, I think Georgia Tech could definitely win that game. The game against Gardner-Webb, obviously, that's a good game to get your feet up under you. In fact, I used to hate cupcakes at the beginning. Now, since we don't have a preseason, we never had a preseason, I guess in older age, I'm like, I'll take it. I kind of wish that was first for you guys, but you have Clemson, September the 13th. I mean, I think that's a very competitive game. Y'all could come into that game 2-0. Of course, I
Why
hope
don't
my
you come
Tigers
down
win
to
it.
Atlanta? You going to come to Atlanta?
I may have to come to Atlanta for that game and us have a good time down there.
Do you know Pigskin Pete?
I do know Pigskin Pete. He's an
He,
old friend of mine.
he's coming down to see old Rec Talk. We're going to that game together, so we could just make a whole party out of it.
That would be a good time. I haven't seen Pete in a while. I need to text him. I need to get him back on the show. He and I go way, way back. But I'll make this fast. I don't want to spend the whole time talking. You're my guest on the show, and I want you talking. But I'll make this fast. I see you beating Temple. I see you beating Wake. I see you potentially beating. Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is so schizophrenic right now. One moment they look good, next minute they look. You're at Duke. Not worried about that. Syracuse could be a tough game. You could potentially win that. It's Bobby Dodd. NC State. How long are they going to hold on to Dave? We don't know. You're off. You're at Boston College. I agree with you. That's a game that it's like, you got to get the stank off. If you're going to become better, you have to get, when Clemson actually started going over the hump, it's when they started winning the games they were supposed to win. Play really well and win most of the games that was kind of a toss-up. And in the games they were supposed to get their tails kicked, they started playing really close and winning some of those. And I think that's where you're at. I agree with you what you said there earlier. Pitt, y'all should beat them. And then Georgia, just go in and play competitive, Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I can't stand them. I'd hate the University of Georgia, and I hate the whole city of Athens.
I love rivalries. Well, my man, thank you for coming on. I have a lot of respect for Georgia Tech, and I'm looking forward to seeing, what they do this season. I hope they lose to my team. I hope no one in Clemson is overlooking them, but I have a lot of respect. Tell us where we can find you, my friend.
You can find me right here on YouTube. We do videos all the time, live stream games, and I talk a bunch of nonsense. Like I've talked a bunch of trash about Colorado and particularly Deion Sanders and the fact that I don't think he's a very good coach. And he, for some reason, wants to follow his son everywhere, which is quite weird to me. I do videos on, I think Bill Belichick's going to be the worst hire in history because when people that played for him were asked if he could recruit, they laughed. Hysterically. So you can search Rec Talk on YouTube. I'm at Rec_Talk on Twitter because some sex bot stole my password to my other one. So now I'm at Rec_. So that's where you can find me. And look, I do hate the University of Georgia with a passion, but even though Clemson's a rival, I went when we played y'all in Death Valley last year. One of the best experiences I've had treated by a rival fan base. I don't have any Clemson fans that I know that I dislike. You guys are pretty good people. Maybe it's an ACC thing. I don't know.
Well, man, I wish you the very best, except for our third game of the season, which is against y'all, and I appreciate you coming on. Hey, everybody, go check out Rec Talk. Let him know that you saw him on the channel. Be good people. Remember, this is college football. We're supposed to have fun. But at the end of the day, we don't supposed to be jerks. So I hope you'll subscribe to his channel. If you haven't subscribed here, I hope you will. Remember, it's free. So, yeah, why wouldn't you? Y'all take care of yourself, and as always, go Tigers.
To hell with Georgia.
All right, so I'm going to clap here just as a marker to myself. So when I am, editing later, I'll know where to get rid of this. Yeah. All right, now, if you have, I think we have about 10 minutes left. Would you be okay if I ask you your perception of Clemson football? I want an outsider's point of view. I don't care if it's brutal. That's fine, because if you know anything about my channel, I'm the antichrist of Clemson football, because I would dare question Dabo Swinney. Oh, never. So
like national title.
Yeah. I would dare question Dabo Swinney and the local media that props him up, which one of them admitted to me off the air after I had them on the show that the flagship station, you have fun with this one. The flagship station, all of their personalities, on air personalities, all the major coaches of the sports there at Clemson has their phone number, and if they were to rail them, they would get a text from the coach potentially.
If they
Admitted
were critical.
if they were critical, and admitted that to me after I had him on my show. We did a live stream, and I asked him if there was anything that was weird going on. He's like, I've never been pressured by my radio station and all this bunch of stuff. And then once he got off of the show, bro, he admitted to me it was worse than I thought. The coaches will text him, and I'm like, what?
It's access media, man. Hey, I mean, it's like that. If you ask a critical question at Tech, first of all, they're just going to pull your press credentials.
Yeah.
They're just not going to do it, which is why I don't see a lot of value in it, and I like what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, guys like you and I, we have a platform because. And yeah, that is what it is. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm going to do this thing where I bring you back on, okay? I'll make this fast. Here we go, right here. We only have about 8 minutes left, so here we go. Have you ever wondered what someone outside of Clemson thought about Clemson? I know you say you don't care, but sometimes I like to hear what they think. What's the thoughts? And who better to ask than someone who has a school really close to us, who will play in Game 3 this year. It'll be Clemson's first home or away game, not home game, away game. So I'm going to ask my buddy Rec Talk, big Georgia Tech fan, what do you think about Clemson football, where it's at, where it's going? Let's just have some fun with this. And I'm the one asking, so you go ahead. Tell me, what is your perception of Clemson football, where they're at and where they're going?
Well, I'm a Georgia Tech fan, and I am a nerd. So the first thing that a Georgia Tech fan is going to do is pivot from football and talk about your academics. You do have a decent engineering school. It's nowhere near the caliber of Georgia Tech. So that's first things first. But setting that aside, I have a ton of respect for Clemson's program. You know, when I started watching, you got through, was it Bowden? You get to Dabo, and then the Clemsoning thing happened. Right?
Yeah.
Couldn't get over the big one. Was it Taj Boyd? These different guys you had. And that Georgia Tech rivalry was pretty fierce throughout like the 2010s, 2000s, maybe not so much the 2010s. But I really like Clemson's program. It's what, an hour and a half from Atlanta. It's not a long drive. These are two teams that have been playing for a very long time. And I'm actually going to defend Clemson because I think Clemson and especially Dabo have been unfairly criticized. Sometimes Dabo does silly things. He talks about NIL being his name, image, and likeness, and some people think that this is silly. But the reason that people are critical of Dabo today is because he's elevated the standard at Clemson above what 99% of programs have. Most programs are going to be okay with a conference title, maybe every 5 to 10 years. Most programs are going to be okay with that. At Clemson right now, it's playoffs or bust, right? And Dabo built that, which is pretty impressive seeing how he's never been a coordinator before. I don't really think, he was kind of thrown in as the interim. And I think you got to respect what Dabo has done. And for the most part, he sticks to his guns with his stuff. And something that I can't say about, probably most coaches is I do think he genuinely does right by his players. We talked about earlier in the segment, I've been to Clemson. I went there the last time we played y'all at home. Probably the best I've ever been treated by any fan base. I don't think I've ever even got in an internet troll argument with a Clemson fan. So you guys are A-okay in my book. And, I ain't got no problems with you. Ton of respect for you.
Well, I that's good to hear. That's good to hear because, internet trolls, every school has them, okay? But when people do what you and I do, you find out that there are certain schools they have that's their entire fan base. Like when LSU, and I have a few good LSU followers here, but I said a few, and I mean almost two, like literally the meaning. When LSU had that flash in the pan 2019 season, that was unbelievable, but it was here and it was gone like a smelly fart. I found out that LSU fans, for the most part, are unbearable. unflippin' bearable. So I'm glad to hear that Clemson fans are pretty good. Versus Miami, versus Clemson. How scared are you of Miami versus Clemson? Like if you had to play them tomorrow, because y'all have no problem beating them. I mean, what's your perception of like, oh, we have Clemson on the schedule this year. We don't have Miami on the schedule this year. We kind of wish we did so we could beat them again. I mean, what's that approach like?
Well, yeah, it's night and day. First of all, I went to Miami as part of my honeymoon, and it's one of the most disgusting cities I've ever been to. I was in the same hotel that the NBA draft. They were doing the NBA draft down there at that time. Same hotel as the NBA players. There's greasy, half-eaten chicken legs in the hallway of the hotel room. So I don't really have any respect for Miami. It's a complete 180. A bunch of annoying fans, Ed Reed, all this, that, and the other. Never won the ACC, which is also embarrassing. Something I can't say is Georgia Tech. And as great as a coach as Mario Cristobal is, he's only beat Tech once in his 3 years, and twice in kind of embarrassing fashion. When they've once when they won, you can credit it directly to coaching. Just take a knee. You can do it in the video game. It's one button. So I'm not at all scared of Miami, and I'm not going to be scared of Miami until they can beat us on a consistent schedule. They dodge us this year. Who else dodges us?
Florida
Tar
State.
Heels.
Tar Heels. Yeah,
We're
yeah.
4-0 in the last 4 years against them, and I think they dodge us for like 5 years from now, and I think Miami for 2. So it's the opposite with Clemson. There's nothing. You have been more dominant over us than Georgia has, and that pains me to say. Think about how painful it is to be a Georgia Tech fan. Your 2 biggest rivals have been at the top of the college football world, one kind of after the other. You know when the last time we beat you was?
Oh, golly.
Been
Deshaun Watson's freshman year?
Correct. In Atlanta. I was there, and I'm pretty sure the reason we won, if you remember, is because he got hurt in the first quarter of that game.
Yeah. And they put in, and I'm not knocking Cole Stout. Cole Stout, I think he was just not the right fit for the offense. They put Cole Stout in, and I'll never forget, there was the quick pass out to the left, and your guy jumped the route and took it to the house. I'll never forget that as long as I live. Yep.
And that was the injury game. We also had a guy with a compound leg fracture, air cast, went to Emory. So that was a violent game.
That was a violent game. At least when we get together, it's a lot of fun. Do you see Georgia Tech, and I know we were talking about Clemson here, do you see Georgia Tech with this current coaching staff finally, and I'm not saying this towards them, I'm saying the ACC has been pure trash for a while. I mean, and then you're seeing Florida State going down like they have, and, Louisville's getting better, but it's like, up and down.
Yeah.
Do you see Georgia Tech challenging Clemson in the next few years legitimately for the ACC that's pretty much up for grabs other than Clemson?
Josh Pate, you probably saw this. Josh Pate, in his way too early backhanded compliment at Tech. I'm going to change this later if I'm wrong. I'm going to claim genius if I'm right pick. Picked Clemson over Georgia Tech this year. As far as consistently being at the top of a conference with Clemson, Tech has a little way to go. What I will say is Tech has all the right pieces in place. If you're not a Tech fan, this is probably not on your radar. Tech's never recruited well. Tech's never really invested in their football program. When Paul Johnson was here, he actually mentioned Clemson when complaining about his own team. He's like, when we recruit against Clemson, look what they got. Look what we got. Where do you want to go? Jay Batt comes in. He was an executive from Alabama. Got the naming rights done at the stadium. Raised $200 million like that. Never seen it happen at Georgia Tech. And it's no coincidence that this man comes in, injects money into your program, and you flip a 5-star from Florida State. That's no coincidence. You also beat out Ohio State. You get Christian Garrett, you flip him from Georgia. You flip Tay Harris from Clemson. You keep Dalen Pinson from flipping to USC. And these are teams that have more money than you. So also, Jay Batt was this close to being South Carolina's next AD, and Tech was able to keep him. They've also been able to keep Buster Faulkner. So Tech, in the past has kind of been the springboard for coaches. You look at not George, yeah, George O'Leary goes to Notre Dame. Now he lied on his resume and whatnot, but you ended up losing these coaches. You've got the right guy in Brent Key. I don't care if someone's a Tech guy most of the time. Just like I don't think Alabama fans care that Nick Saban is from West Virginia. I'm pretty sure they could care less. The only reason it matters for me and Brent Key is because it makes him, in my opinion, much less likely to jump ship. Because he probably could have already went and made more money. And my intuition is that he's taking less money to get his coaches paid. So I'm excited. Like, I haven't seen this happen at Tech in a while. And all that's correlated with what you're seeing on the field. There's a lot that goes on to putting a football team on the field. As weird as it sounds, it doesn't have anything to do with football.
Yeah, it does. And you were talking about $200 million there. Money matters. Money has always mattered. And as the days go by in college football, we see money matter. It matters even more and more and more. I'm going to shotgun some questions to you, then we're going to end the segment on the outside perception of Georgia Tech, a Georgia Tech fan, someone who knows football, looking at Clemson. And I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but trust me, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Right.
Do you see Dabo Swinney right now? He's I think he just turned 55 or he's something like that right now. Do you see him retiring within the next 5 years?
So he'd be 60. I don't. I mean, I feel like Dabo is going to remain at Clemson as long as he wants. Shy of him pulling a Florida State on you like 2 years in a row. Like that might get him fired. But look, Dabo just won your conference last year and made a playoff appearance, which everyone's been crapping on him. Clemson, I'm sure, have you heard it? Clemson's on the decline. No good. Done. Washed up. Fire Dabo. There's not a lot of sense to be had now. I mean, Clemson is returning as much talent as anyone in the country this year.
Yeah. And on that, you just set up another question for me. Clemson returns 8 starters on the offense. You have 3-year starter Cade Klubnik with 3 years with Garrett Riley. Matt Luke, arguably the best offensive line coach in the country. Year 2, 4 out of 5 starters. Best wide receiving core since we had T. Higgins and company. Have 7 returning on the defense. Tom Allen, someone who is just, after hearing his press conference, I was ready to go play for him, run through a wall, and go punch a gang of bikers. I felt like I could do it and get away with it.
It's oddly specific.
Do you see? I know, I haven't been thinking about that. I think that Harley will fit in my garage. With that said, do you I'm talking about legitimately. Don't tickle my ears here. Do you legitimately see Clemson making a realistic, we don't need Miami to lose by 21 points or lose a 21-point lead against Syracuse? Do you really see Clemson being a problem this year and actually being a contender for the national championship?
So let me think about that. We're in the preseason. So if you think back to last year, no one thought Syracuse was going to be the team they were. I didn't think Miami was going to be the team they were either. A lot of people didn't think Georgia Tech was going to be as good as they were. A lot of people thought NC State was going to be much better than they were. All the evidence points to Clemson, I think, unarguably being the front runner for the conference. That I don't think is arguable. How do they stack up against, I guess, the Ohio States, Georgia's, who else? Notre Dame, Penn State, maybe. I don't think anyone stacks up to Ohio State right now. I also don't think that's arguable. I think you could definitely be a contender. I'm not super educated on the details of your roster, but look, they did this research 5 or 6 years ago. If you want to be a contender, you need 50% plus one player, 4 or 5 stars or above. Clemson's had that, right? Clemson still has that. Clemson can definitely be a contender in 2025, I think, nationally.
Last question for you, because I know we actually ran over on time, so we're going to hang out. I appreciate you coming on. If Clemson were to start falling off the mountain, now, they've did some sliding over the past 5 years. I've talked about that. That's the reason I'm the Antichrist in the Clemson community. But unfortunately, I've been right about some of those a lot of those things I pointed out, and I don't mean that as a jerk. I'm just saying if I was going to take the criticism, I'll take the credit for being right. With that said, as an outsider, if Clemson were start to, slide off the mountain after this 2025 season, what things do you think would actually undermine their program as an outsider?
Oh, well, number one, and you probably agree with this, if Dabo just regressed to some bad habits that got him into that downslide. So his aversion to use the portal was silly. It was just silly. That was an impediment that he placed. I don't see that happening, though. If Clemson were to slide off the mountain, I mean, I have to think you're in such good shape. Oh, if he just refused to make outside hires and got back into we're going to promote everyone from within, and then all our position coaches are going to be ex-players and stuff. Wide receivers coach is an ex-wide receiver player. I think if he for some reason just reverted back to that, and it would be Dabo putting you in that position. But I don't really see that. I don't see any reason for him to do that or that he would do that, but I think that's probably what it would take. Or just the rest of the ACC rose to your level, which is far less likely.
Yeah. I'm interested in how we're going to approach the quarterback situation after this season because I have a lot of Clemson fans who's telling me, oh, Tate Reynolds, this kid coming out of high school, he's this and he's that. And maybe I've missed something, but for me, I feel like Clemson's hesitation to drop big money, whether we like it or not, it's here to stay, unless it's regulated, and I have mixed feelings on regulation. It can be overregulated. As human beings, we're people of extremes. We overfix stuff. But anyway, different video, different channel, probably.
This is my 12th Diet Coke today. I don't moderate anything.
Yeah, there we go. One of my main concerns right now is quarterbacks who are worth their weight in salt cost a lot of money, whether they're in the portal or coming out of high school. And I think that's going to be a bridge we're going to have to cross. And I don't know how fast we're going to cross it. Most likely we're going to have to get bit in the butt before that is actually fixed. But what do I know?
Is that an aversion of Dabo's? Like, because he was very against NIL. What is his thing? He wants all the players to make the same amount, or what? Like, do you have an insight on that? I feel like I've heard that somewhere.
The overall thought is that first he does want, from what I'm understanding, he wants everyone to at least be paid in some form. And then if you do really well and people are buying your jersey and they want you to do advertisements for them, you make what you make. So if you end up making more money than people, hey, it is what it is, but he wants everyone paid. The problem is, he has said for a long time that he's not going to give money to guys out of the transfer portal because he wants people who's Clemson first. I think the problem we're going to run into, Rec Talk, is that once Cade is gone, unless you find like a Sammy Brown, the highest rated linebacker we've ever signed coming out of high school, Sammy Brown's family were big Clemson fans, huge Clemson fans. So unless you find a Sammy Brown at quarterback who would, they pee white and orange, and they need a pill for that, by the way. That's an infection. You're not going to get that guy, and the undermining of Clemson up to this point has been he's been hiring a bunch of inexperienced guys because they either were people he really liked or people who were former players. I bit him in the butt. That's hence why you have Matt Luke, you have Tom Allen.
I'll tell you who else that bit in the butt as far as on the coaching side was Mark Richt. Hired his son, brought him to Miami. And I don't have anything against any of those guys, but that was something that probably kept him from getting where he would have liked to get to. But yeah, I didn't know that about Dabo. But look, I don't have to like it, but it's kind of like, here's what you got to do to be competitive. Hey, if you got to come in here, like they're going to look at that like an unpaid internship, like we would look at an unpaid internship as. That's just the way it is.
Sure.
I mean, what is the average number of transfers each player has? I bet it's more than 2.5.
I guarantee you. It is.
Yeah.
And then some of these guys I'm seeing they're transferring, 4 times. I mean,
I don't know if you've had it. Last year, we had kids that transferred in Portal 1 before spring and left in Portal 2. Literally only played the spring game.
Yeah.
So, like, at some point, and that isn't the topic of your video, but you got to do something a little more sensible than that, I think.
Sure. I mean, Dominique Thomas played for us. He transferred in from a small school. He was really good running back, but he was like third down the line. The guy could play. His name was Quadzilla. That was his nickname. Everybody liked him. Came into the 2023 spring practice. He lit it up. He was on the roster for 2023. Saw very little time. He transferred to Georgia State. I want to say he played the spring game in 2024. After that, he hit the transfer portal again, and he went to Ole Miss. And, the guy's talented. I mean, I wished he was at Clemson right now. But, something's got to happen. He is the Bill Clinton of college football.
He's taking players from us, a ton of them.
Yeah.
In fact, you know what? I've got a question for you, and I don't know if you even know that this trend exists. What is with the trend in the portal of Clemson to Georgia Tech to UMass? Pumachan, E.T. Rubin, both Clemson, Georgia Tech, UMass.
I did not know that Rubin went to UMass.
I don't think he hardly ever played at Tech. And Pumachan, all he did was run it right down Georgia's throat when everyone in the world knew he couldn't throw, and he just ran right into the end zone.
Yeah. The interesting thing about him was he came in when we had a decently loaded quarterback room, where we were coming off the heels of it. And so many people were trying to compare him to Deshaun Watson. And I was like, y'all, listen, we got to quit this crap. I'm not knocking the young man, but I'm just saying you're throwing around words, and I don't know if you really understand what those words mean.
He's a generational talent. You don't have one of those in every recruiting class.
And if you talk to most Clemson fans will tell you that if they were given the choice between Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson to run a college football team, and you ask me that, and I'm telling you, Deshaun Watson would be the pick. I'm telling you. Deshaun Watson over Trevor. Yes, sir. Because Deshaun Watson, the very same year that he got hurt against y'all, and we lost that game, he came back in later that season with a torn ACL. They did something to his knee, and he beat South Carolina. The guy just had a fight that I just can't. I mean, anyway.
You MacGyvered his knee together.
He MacGyvered his knee, with a paper clip and some chewing gum.
Yeah.
That was it. My man, tell me where we can find you online.
You can find me here on YouTube. We do videos all the time, talk our trash. We have a good time. We have live shows, and then sometimes we just do random stuff. But it's a good time. You can find me on Twitter. I guess they're calling it X now. If you want to see the worst marketer in the world, I guess you can see Elon. And that's not even a political statement. Why is it named X? But @rec_talk.
Absolutely. Rec Talk, thanks for coming on the show. Everybody go check him out. Subscribe to him. Let him know you saw him on the show. We're going to have a good time. Y'all take care of yourself. College football, please come here very quickly. Go Tigers. Man, thanks